Welcome to the Album Anniversary Podcast. Today's show is about Beautiful Things by Gungor. It was released February 16th, 2010 and is celebrating a 15-year anniversary. Hi there. Before we start the show, I want to remind everybody I have started a Patreon, and I'm hoping people will go over there and sign up. It's totally free. I'm not doing tiers right now. I'm just trying to kind of see if people will join me over there for just a little bit more community. People keep on leaving social media. People come and go, and I want a place for kind of a little spot that I can call my own that would be able to, be kind of build that community. So again, there's no tiers right now. You just go up and you say join for free. It's the same content, although I'm going to try and think about doing extra content on Patreon just to see if I can get people over there. Maybe at some point I'll do some tiers. I don't know. But right now it's totally free. And actually, one of the things I'm really hoping people will do is I'm going to try and in the next couple of weeks get up a poll or some sort of like survey to kind of get feedback about the show. That's what I'd love. I'd love to hear what people like, what people don't like, what would people, want to hear extra of. If there's extra things that people do want to hear, I'd love to hear those. I have other interests. I have other things that are going on in my life. Whether it's just interviewing guests about just other random things, not about specific albums, whatever. I'm open to ideas, but I'm kind of hoping to do that a little. So again, you can just go to Patreon. If you search for the Album Anniversary Podcast, it comes up. You just look for the chickadee. That's the branding all over, although maybe at some point I'll have to move on from that. But that's what it is right now because I want to keep on using it. So there you go. The Album Anniversary Podcast over on Patreon. Easy to find. All right. Thanks so much for listening to my little announcement. Let's get back to the show. Hi, I'm your host, Caleb, or Caleb the Spy on Twitter and Instagram, and every day on social media I post about album anniversaries. So on the Album Anniversary Podcast, we review and talk about an album on the anniversary of its release date. This show is a chance to talk about why we love an album or why an album is important to us. Albums on the show do often focus on alternative rock, punk, and my strange obsession with ska. In the 90s, I was super into the Christian music scene, so that does come up often on the show. Today, I'm joined by Theo to talk about Beautiful Things by Gungor. Theo, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to being on your podcast ever since I first heard about it.
Yeah, and we tried to do it last year, and I was still, I think, trying to figure things out, to be totally honest. So
Right.
It didn't work out, so I'm glad we've circled back and been able to get you on the show. First-time guests, often I kind of like to hear kind of about a little bit about your musical journey, if people are making music, that's also cool. But, just the simple things like, were you raised in a house around music, or was it something more later in life that you kind of discovered?
Not really raised around music, but kind of a typical Gen X kid. I kind of was at the tail end of Gen X. So,
Sure.
Listening to the radio, listening to mixtapes, that was probably around the time that hip hop kind of became a big thing.
Sure.
And then, I lived through MP3s all the way up to, current streaming services. So just through all that, just listening to all kinds of different genres of music. And so nothing, one thing in particular, but CCM, I was more introduced to after around when I was 20 years old.
Okay.
And became a Christian, and then kind of found, oh, hey, there's all these different genres within CCM, so kind of discovered those at that time.
Yeah. So you have the experience of I bought this on tape, now I'm going to buy it on CD, now I'm going to buy an MP3 of it, and
Yes.
Potentially now, like me, I've swung back to vinyl, so I'm buying it on another format for some of these.
Exactly. So yeah, I'm kind of listening sometimes on CDs, sometimes on MP3, and then sometimes, YouTube music or something like that.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, I'm a YouTube music user. I like that I spent the time back when it was Google Play Music,
Right.
and I spent like 3 months going through all of my digital collection because I went digital in the 2000s. I was like, I don't need all this junk around the house, and I didn't.
Right.
I think I lived in apartments, and I was like, this is great. Now I look back and go, oh, there's all these things that I wish I would have bought on CD, but at least I have my MP3 copy of it before was it iTunes shut all that down and they like hard coded
Right.
to just those, you can't download their MP3s anymore. And
Right.
so I actually have my whole collection on YouTube Music, which is nice, but occasionally flakes out on me. YouTube Music, not always the most trustworthy app, I will be honest.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, so sometimes it's nice just to have a backup
Yeah,
if you
exactly.
need it.
Yeah, no, I there's a couple CDs that I will hang on to like grim death because they're like the specific one. The ones I always think of is the Black Eyed Siva. They were a kind of a lesser known, and then they became Model Engine, kind of lesser known Christian alternative band. And only recently have they gotten one of their albums back up
I
on
see.
streaming because I think
Right.
they remixed it, and I think he felt I don't know why he's now kind of delved back into it, but like those are CDs that you go to look for them and you're like $160 for this CD. Nope, I can't rebuy that. I gotta hang on to this like grim death because
Exactly.
it's like I can't replace that. So awesome. Well, it's good to hear a little bit about your story. I think
Thank
with
you.
that out of the way, let's jump in. We'll tackle this album.
Sounds great.
My soul cries out, my soul cries out for you. These bones cry out, these dry bones cry for you to live and move, 'cause only you can raise
So again, we're talking about Beautiful Things by Gungor, again released February 16th, 2010. I feel pretty good about that date. I've started to caveat a lot of these because there's other dates floating out there, but I feel pretty confident about that one. I do remember having this album sometime in 2010. I know we'll get to that in a bit. So I feel pretty good about that date of February 16th, 2010. This was, and I think this is a shock to a lot of people, this was the group's third release, but it was their first as Gungor instead of the Michael Gungor band. So this is kind of a third release, but also first release, which is kind of weird.
I did actually kind of looking into the album, I did find out about his previous releases, which was kind of surprising, and kind of listen to that music and a little bit of the evolution there.
Yeah, it definitely was. I mean, it's always been kind of this core idea, but yeah, there was an evolution. So this album was put out on Brash Music, which honestly, I think I only own this digitally. I think going back to that discussion, I don't think I have a physical. In fact, I feel really confident I don't have a physical copy of this. So I never looked through the liner notes, to be totally honest. So, but Brash Music, I don't think I had ever heard of them. And I went onto Discogs and kind of tried to dig out like what else have they put out, and even that was not super helpful. They have an old website. So here's what I can tell: the label has Gungor and a bunch of other artists I have never heard of, and then one Coldplay EP, Brother and Sister. And honestly, I'm so confused because nobody else on this label I've even heard of. And then there's one Coldplay EP, which looks legit.
Super random.
Yes.
I heard about it from you and went on there and looked at it just to see it for myself. And yes, super random.
Yeah.
I don't understand it.
It's so confusing. Like, it's not like Coldplay, like, I would understand even recently. Like, I get it. Coldplay's kind of died off in popularity, but it doesn't look like it's that. It's not like from 2024. This looks like it was, back in the day when they were still a heavy hitter. So I don't know if this is just totally random in my opinion, but there you go. Brash Music. You can look up their website if you want to look at it more. I want to mention the album artwork. And again, like I said, I got this digitally and I don't think I had ever looked really, really closely at the album artwork. If you look really closely at it, it's a bunch of bad things that are like made out to look pretty. Because if you look at the album artwork, it's got these like flowers on it, right? But if you look closely at the actual flowers, they're made up of things like skulls, syringes, and like guns and like other kind of weird things. So the album artwork is actually because if you just look at it from a distance, it's a flower. It's like these five flowers. I'm good at this. But if you actually look closer, it's kind of all these, it's a collage of these like skulls and other things that make up the album artwork. So that was cool. Like I was kind of just taking a closer look and I was like, oh, look at that. That's cool. So there you go. The album artwork does stand out when you look a little closer at it.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm going to look at that after we're done talking because I did not notice that at all.
Yeah. So it's kind of cool.
That's cool.
So let's get into kind of some of the production here. So this album was produced by Michael Gungor, who is Gungor, the namesake. And this is a bit of a collective. I mean, the main, I would say if you're going to ask me who is Gungor, I think it is Michael Gungor and Lisa Gungor. That's his wife. And I think they're still married. I'll be honest, I don't know. But that is what this group has always been, is just the two of them. And then all these other people, and I count like 14 other people who were involved in this. Just for, kind of to put this in context a little, Michael does banjo, he does bass, he composes some stuff, he does guitar, both electric and acoustic, harmonica, piano. He also produced the album, which I think he plays a toy piano, and then he does the vocals. Lisa is doing a glockenspiel, some keyboards. She worked on some loops for it, piano as well. So like they're doing a lot of things, but then there's a whole ton of people that contributed to this. There's other people too. There's a David Gungor, which I'm assuming is related. He's on some bass on this. All sorts of people are involved with this. So yeah, that's kind of a bit of the collective that this album is. The last two notes I have on this. One is that it was recorded. This is off Discogs or AllMusic, one of the places where I think it's literally just a note from the liner notes if you get a physical copy of this. And it says, recorded in the mountains, at Michael and Lisa's house, in a few random studios, in a hotel, and anywhere else we could set up a mic or two. So I think that is kind of a bit of the recording process, is maybe that adds to the 20 people. It's not 20, but the 10 to 15 people that were involved. I do think this was a bit of a experiment, and that is definitely, you talked about going back and listening to some of those older things. I think this is where they started to lean into a little of that more experimentation, and I think that kind of highlights that.
Yeah, definitely. Lisa is from New Mexico, which is my home state.
Oh,
so
nice.
I don't know, maybe that's why they played more concerts here in New Mexico than maybe most CCM bands type of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that was kind of somewhat of a connection for myself. Yeah.
And I think because I know they did part of this in Denver as well. I know they had moved up to a place in Denver. So yeah, my guess is just, I don't know, they're traveling all over and just packing up and recording every place they could. So
exactly.
Yeah. Last thing I want to mention is that Beautiful Things was nominated in the Grammy category for Best Rock or Rap Gospel Album and Best Gospel Song, respectively. I don't know why I have respectively there. It's probably because I just copied and pasted off something. My guess is the song is Beautiful Things, just because that was the lead single, and I think it was the only single. It's the namesake of the album. So it did garner 2 Grammy nominations. So, that's pretty cool for an album that probably didn't hit mainstream CCM the way a lot of those ones that get nominated for Grammys do. So kind of cool in my opinion. All right. Well, with those fun facts, I don't know how fun they were, but they were facts about the album, sure. With those out of the way, I'm just keep on saying with those out of the way, and then we move on to the next thing. We'll jump into our questions. Question, which I deleted off my script, so I didn't think this through. This is going to be me really flying by the seat of my pants, because for some reason when I was messing with the script for this, I totally deleted it. But where did you first hear about this album?
So here in Albuquerque, we have a couple Christian stations. Some of them are national, but there is one Christian station that is local.
Okay.
And so they play a lot of like current music that was popular at the time. So it was basically through that station I first kind of heard, I think the first single, the title track, and then I got the album as well. I think I got a CD of it, so that
Okay.
was kind of my introduction to
Okay.
the album.
Cool. I totally messed up the script for this, so I had to think this through like off the fly, and I feel pretty confident about this. At the time, we were going to a church here in Minneapolis called Bethlehem Baptist. That's a
Mm.
big Reformed church. John Piper was the pastor of it,
Oh,
and I feel pretty confident that our worship director, me and him would talk music, and I'm pretty sure he recommended this to me, and he was like,
really?
"Hey, have you ever heard of this band called Gunger?" Because we'll get into it, but I mean, this album has a little bit of worship feel, and he listened to all sorts of stuff. I mean, he was not just listening to worship music; he listened to all sorts of stuff. His daughter actually went on to she did a bunch of covers, but I mean, she was pursuing a music career at one point, and
Hmm.
I don't know if she ever hit it big, but I'm pretty sure that that is my introduction. Is he kind of recommended this me again? Me and him would go back and forth on music stuff, and he recommended it to me, and I went and checked it out, and it's like, oh, this is great. I love this. So that is my introduction to it. As a youth, not a youth pastor, but a worship director said, hey, you should go check this album out, and sure enough, I did.
It's
So.
coming down. Oh, I don't know what you've been told, but heaven is coming down to the world. I said, I don't know what you've been told, but heaven is coming down to the world. I said, heaven is coming down. Yeah.
Our next question, and this is one where we tend to go long a little, but what is it that you love about this album?
So for me, after this album was released, I was actually able to attend a concert
Hmm.
here in Albuquerque at a local church where they played a lot of the music from the album.
Okay.
But one of the things that they did was in between each song, they had someone come up and actually do some poetry
Hmm.
in between each song. So it was kind of a nice balance and was like an amazing experience to actually hear the album
Yeah.
in that context, and to see kind of the way that they did deliver the music in so many different instruments and styles,
Yeah.
and so there was a lot of people there within the band
Yeah.
playing various instruments. So it left an impression on me, definitely.
Yeah, that'd be a really I mean, there's a lot going on here musically. And so like it feels like yeah, that would be quite the experience. I've never gotten to see this band live. In fact, it'd be interesting to go back on like setlist.com, which is a website I like looking at because it just people upload set lists and you can see kind of where a band's played as long as it's relatively new. You get into the 90s and they don't have a lot of that. So it's unfortunate for some of that, but you know, if they're a relatively recent band, you can kind of figure out where they've been and songs they've played. This would be an experience because I think that is one of the drawing points for me is that the music is really there's just so much going on and it blends so much. There's a whole bunch of different styles. Like there's some rock on here, there's some folk, there's also there's a bluesy song in the middle of it. I mean, there's a really funky song. There's a song that's got a really funky kind of intro, and so like they're all over the place musically, and yet it's this unique worship. It's definitely worshipful. I don't know if it was intended to be a worship album. It probably is not going to work in a lot of corporate settings, but it's really interesting to have that kind of combination, all those musical styles, and to still kind of have that worship feel. I think it's a pretty captivating sound in my opinion.
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely.
And then I also like the lyrics. I think the lyrics are good. You know, you talk about like there's a lot of different themes that go on, and I don't know if there's any of the songs that kind of jump out to you, but like you know, just there's a lot of themes of like hope and renewal. And obviously, you know, the song Beautiful Things, I mean, that's a great message, right? Finding beautiful things in life struggles. And especially when you tie that in with the cover art and kind of some of the bad things that they use to show these beautiful things, there's a lot of clear messages that I think come through that can be really captivating for people.
Absolutely. And kind of revisiting it again because I hadn't listened to it
Yeah.
in so long. You kind of see a lot of kind of probably his struggles and questions
Yeah.
kind of that he was going through at the time, but also kind of utilizing that within his art, and
Yeah.
something that still probably speaks to people today.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's what helps it connect with people. Like I think there's some of those themes that he touches on. I think it allows people to have those moments with it, right? I mean, it's one of my I think a lot of people, and I'm not meaning to just bag on modern worship, but like a lot of modern worship is so generic. It feels like it's so whitewashed that it does take you out of it, right? I mean,
Right.
you know, some of the great hymns of old are written out of these tragic events, you know, or these like these difficult life situations where that's just not how it feels. And that's me being a little cynical, but like, and he's gone on. I mean, I don't know if he would say he's left the faith entirely. I mean, I think he would at this point, is now no longer identifies as a Christian and whatnot. So this is clearly stuff that he was already dealing with. But I think, yeah, some of those themes that he's dealing with and some of those questions he's asking, I think they do come through. Not as much as maybe on later work, but they're starting to show here.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it is something that kind of develops in other albums. I'm not sure how many other albums that but you kind of you see it, but just it's not as clear, as kind of blatant as you kind of see it here.
The next question we always dive into is, why is this album something that's important to you? And maybe if it's not important, you know, that's a pretty high label, I'll be honest. But if it's not something that's important, why do you think it's something that still holds up? Because again, we're talking about it 15 years later, not 15 minutes, 15 years later.
I think it's kind of what you touched upon previously in the previous question, is just that the album reminds me of, you know, for myself to kind of pray through and worship through struggles and things like that, but also to kind of know that I'm not necessarily alone in that. There's other people out there who are kind of going through the same thing. So it's kind of a reassuring thing, and it's kind of something that every Christian is going to experience, right? In their walk, they're going to have those times and those moments. So I think that's part of why this album holds up in a thematic way. But also just, while the album, I think, kind of has the sound of its time, definitely, I think it still is so well constructed that the songs kind of remain artistically so well presented.
Yes. I think that's probably the big thing for me, is that I think the one thing you could never accuse this group of individuals, specifically Michael, of being is not kind of authentic. Like the category I put it under was like this artistic integrity. Like he has that. Yeah, there's some, I will say, like the blues moment and the funk moment do almost feel jarring at times a little, but like I think that's what he wanted to try. And so it's like, let's do that. And that creativity that is coming out of this, there's also a lot of moments, not a lot, but there's a number of moments where like you can hear them like talking, and I think that was left in intentionally. I don't think it was like this total spur of the moment, but like there's these talking moments where like they're transitioning to something, and they just kind of left that in. And like you could tell that this was not just, all right, let's track some drums, let's track some bass. Like there is a collaborative artistic endeavor that they're trying to take, and I think they push some boundaries in here. I mean, they when you throw this many genres onto an album, you're gonna get that. And yes, it still has its moments that are fairly straightforward and would work in a mainline evangelical setting, But I think that that is one thing that you can't take away from this group, is that artistic expression is something that they are going for, and they've got a lot of integrity. I think you're always going to know it's them, because they're not going to sway from that for anybody.
That's true. Very true.
Yeah. And I think something you touched on too, just that I think it does. Yes, there's some questions, but there is enough of that uplifting nature. I mean, that whole idea, beautiful things, God, you make beautiful things. There's a lot of comments of you make things new, and there's a lot of that in this. And I think that can still be something that people can hang on to. And so I think that is another thing that kind of will help something like this kind of hold up or stand up over the years.
Absolutely.
They could not keep you in their walls. We cannot keep you in ours either. For you are so much greater. Who is like the Lord, the maker of the heavens, who dwells with the poor? He lifts them from the ashes and he seats them among princes. Who is like the Lord?
What would you say are some of your favorite songs off this album?
Well, I think I have to start off with the title track, definitely.
Sure.
Beautiful Things. Just, I love how the song builds up on itself and kind of just grows more with more instruments, it seems like. And then it kind of ends, like you kind of talked about, in a very kind of stripped down, kind of acoustic way, like very naturally.
Yeah.
And it's kind of almost like the song kind of grows in nature, and then kind of another song kind of grows out of thin air, in a sense, at the very end. It's just, it's very amazing. Something I didn't catch, I don't think, too well when I first heard the song early on in when the album first came out. But I think just re-listening to it, just, wow, it's amazing how they deliver that.
Yeah. No, it's pretty clear. I mean, I think this is the one that stands out as the most single-ish. Like it has the most mass appeal of probably any of the songs on here. It's over 5 minutes, but still doesn't feel that way. I mean, and I'm a pretty punk rock guy. I want my short and sweet. Let's get to the point. Let's get this over with. Let's move on to the next song. But this is a beautiful song. It's a great pick for the first single. I feel pretty confident this is the one that got nominated for a Grammy. It's a great one to pick. Pick the title track after. Name the album after. So I agree. It's an absolutely beautiful song. It's hard not. It's my favorite song on the album, and I know that's a little like cliche, but it really is the song that I think stands out the most to me as one of the most re-listenable songs on the album.
Yeah, definitely. I think, during COVID time, we were kind of doing church from home, and we were kind of picking certain worship songs. And I think I picked this song a few times to kind of include in our worship time, just sitting in our living room. And so, yeah, my wife was very happy that we were kind of going to be touching on that song today.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
You Have Me. This one definitely has the Sufjan like influences.
Yeah.
So and there's a few songs in the album that definitely have it, but this one particularly has it. And I think in a strong way. The change, kind of the build up, the change up in the song really strikes me.
Yep.
So yeah, this is my second favorite.
I like that one as well. That's definitely a standout song from it, especially like coming off of Heaven. Like that's the bluesy one. I kind of, my note on that one is, where'd this blues song come from? Because it kind of comes out of nowhere. And so it's interesting that then it kind of tracks back into You Have Me as a kind of follow up, because it is an interesting contrast in a lot of ways. Sufjan, the last thing I would think of is blues for him. So you go from this blues song to kind of a more Sufjan influenced one. So yeah.
Cannot Keep You.
Okay.
So I kind of like the idea. I mean, it's not something that's unique in kind of CCM or worship songs, but kind of not putting God in a box type of idea, which I think is something that isn't touched on too often in CCM songs. And then just the instruments within that song, the violin, the piano, kind of just really is very striking, that song.
Yeah. That's funny. I have notes about other songs. We're going to end up talking about almost all of them. I don't have a ton of notes from that one. So what are other songs that stand out?
So we could talk about Heaven.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, it's very bluesy.
Yep.
It kind of, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Johnny Lang.
Yeah, I am. I'm a Minnesota guy, so
Okay.
I think he's Minnesota. So I'm not a huge fan, but I'm definitely familiar. I know he was on Seinfeld, and
Oh, okay. Really? Was he? I didn't.
I think he was. Hold on, let me Google it. Hang on. I'm gonna edit out my typing here. Oh no, he's not featured on Seinfeld. Oh, I thought there was it's somebody else. There's
It could be somebody else.
Never mind.
That's okay.
Okay, well, I Googled it. He was not on Seinfeld. I'm confusing him with somebody. I don't know what's going on. Anyway.
Yeah. So Johnny Lang, he became a Christian kind of mid-career, and he released kind of a blues Christian album. So that song Heaven kind of reminds me a lot of. He had an album called Turnaround, which came out in 2006. So if anyone's ever curious, checking it out. But yeah, kind of remind me of the song Heaven in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and there's who's that featuring? Let me look it up real quick. That song features somebody on it. Oh, hold on, I have it in my notes earlier. Israel Houghton. I am so good at pronouncing stuff. I think that's the person who features on this song.
Right.
And I don't know anything about him. But
I don't either.
Yeah, he was called out specifically.
Yeah.
That is definitely the song that stands out the most. As like if you were gonna pick songs for like what does the old Sesame Street, one of these things is not like the other. This is the song. Exactly. I will say there's the Call Me Out is the one that's kind of got a little funky intro. That's the other one that I will say I remember I was listening to it and I was like, oh, where'd this come from? Those are the two that I feel like stand out as from the rest of them.
Yeah,
for sure. But yeah,
The Earth Is Yours. Kind of the use there, the glockenspiel, which I'm probably not saying that correctly. That actually reminds me a lot of Danielson. So Danielson uses the glockenspiel a lot in their albums. So yeah, it kind of struck me to have that similarity to that. And I do remember that song kind of specifically when they did the concert.
Oh, okay.
Kind of how amazing that sounded.
Yeah, that's kind of the halfway point of the album. And there's 13 songs on this. That's song 7. And I feel like if they were gonna put this out on vinyl, although I think it's way too long, you'd have to break it into 4 because you can only get about 22 minutes. You can get about 22 minutes on the side of a vinyl. That's the start of side B, and I'm just gonna use the generic side B because although song 13 is 10 minutes long, so I don't know where it is, but it's about the half point of the album in a lot of ways, and I feel like it's a really nice pick-me-up. Those other two songs are a little more they kind of bring the tempo down a little, and this is a really nice pickup kind of as they head into the second half of the album. So that's always kind of my feeling. I really like that song. That's one of my favorites from the album for sure.
Higher, kind of what you kind of mentioned.
Sure.
Again, very Sufjan type of influences, and then the chorus and kind of the synchronized singing between Michael and Lisa is just, it sounds amazing.
Yeah.
So really, really pleasant song. I really enjoyed that one. Cool.
I will say for me, songs 9, 10, 11, Higher is song 10. They do run together just a little bit. Like I do, like I don't know if it's the length of it. Again, the punk rock kid in me is like, I think this is over an hour. I think it's like 105 minutes. So it's pushing it for me. Right. I will say, like, if I was doing it, that'd be a good little collection to put on an EP. The Please Be My Strength, Higher, and Late Have I Loved You, which I really like. Late Have I Loved You. I think that is a really, really cool song. But I kind of feel like those three, you could pull those off and put those in an EP, maybe take one more, you'd cut down the track list a little, make this a little more up the alley. But I do like the kind of some of the stuff later. But yeah, I'll have to re-listen and kind of listen in for it. But I do feel like by this point in the album, there are moments where I'm like, which one is this? I gotta figure out which one of these it is, because it is so much. And maybe that's also a bit of the Sufjan thing. It's kind of how I feel about Sufjan. I kind of feel like, like you download it or you look at it and you're like, oh, okay, All right, 55 minutes. All right, let's go. I'm gonna strap in. So yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Kind of the last one on my list would be Please Be My Strength.
Okay.
And again, this is the one where he touches on kind of the struggle that he's going through in his faith, and kind of his doubts and that type of thing. So I thought it's not necessarily the most amazing song I think on the album, but I think as far as like his sincere
Sure.
struggles and his sincerity in the lyrics kind of come out.
Yeah. I really like, so I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning. Dry
Sure.
Bones for me is a really great opening track. I really like it as a like kind of an epic. What's interesting is it's a lot more kind of straightforward rock
It
than
is.
the rest of the album. Yeah, there's your third track that really stands out as feeling a little different.
Right.
And the rest of the album isn't. Like the rest of the album is kind of playing with some other genres. It's definitely still a rock album. But it's definitely the most, I feel like it's got a nice little epic feel. And then I do like how you go from that beautiful things is good. And then like Brighter Day also has a little bit of that rock element. And so it kind of connects those first three songs together, I think.
Right.
So I do like the way those three work as a unit. I already said I like Beautiful Things, but I like the way those three work as a unit as well, which I think is kind of cool.
It is. I didn't really think of it that way, but it does. It kind of starts off like Dry Bones, very dramatic, thematic, kind of like an 80s, not metal song, but kind of rock song.
Yeah.
It reminds me of there's a band called Extreme. They have an album called Three Sides to Every Story.
Yeah.
And kind of towards certain songs in there, especially the third half of that album, kind of this would almost fit in perfectly with that.
Sure. Yeah. And then I will say I want to talk about the closing because I'm always a big closing guy. That's if an album doesn't have a good closing song, it's irrelevant.
I'm learning that about you listening to your podcast.
It comes up on every show because I want to talk about it. But what I really like People of God as a lead into We Will Run. It's to me, People of God is one of my favorites from this album. And it's late in the album. And I do like when an album has some of those stronger songs toward the end. And I think it's a really good, the chorus on it. Yes, it's fairly straightforward in a lot of ways. It's, kind of almost feels like it's not just Michael, it's a group of people. When they sing that song, they actually sing the words People of God. It's very strong. It really comes through really, really powerfully in my way, or in my opinion. So I really like that. And then I think We Will Run I love it. I know it's 9 minutes and 24 seconds. It's a long one, but it's 5 minutes of mostly instrumental. And so it's like 4 minutes of kind of singing. There's some singing, and then it has this 5-minute instrumental as an ending. And I think it's a great closing to this album. Again, like this maybe doesn't, I will say I'm being picky here. Heaven and what's the other one? Call Me Out. Like those kind of do, like if you pluck those two out potentially, I think it would really, really feel like a real strong cohesive unit, even though I think they should stay. I'm not saying not to do that, but like, I really love the way Dry Bones kind of reconnects with We Will Run at the end. I think they're really good bookends to the album. And I love that about an album. And then especially when you have, the Earth Is Yours right in the middle, there's kind of these like really, really nice high marks throughout this album that kind of really make it work as a cohesive unit. And I think We Will Run is a great song. I love the 5-minute epic instrumental closer. It's great. I love it. So.
That's the thing about this album is just the instruments and the delivery of it. It also really came into focus when you see them live. I bet. What they play in the album, of course, is similar, but when you see they add stuff when they do live stuff, and so the instrumentation, like it really comes out, and it does come out, like thankfully in the album as well. Like you said, it's not very dry in the sense of they're kind of just doing formulaic things. They're actually kind of putting their artistry into it. the one thing I really loved about We Will Run is Lisa's voice
Hmm.
is more, she does kind of a solo part
Yeah.
of that, which you don't really, if I'm trying to remember through the rest of the album, I don't think it really comes up too much. She's more kind of doing background
Yeah.
singing, kind of that type of thing. And she has an amazing voice. I think she even has an album that she released, which I found out about when I was kind of looking into this. So I was like kind of like surprised and happy about that, but then also kind of disappointed that it didn't come up more in the
Sure.
actual.
Yeah, no, I think her vocals on the end are really good. I think it's
Yeah,
a nice fit for that song. So,
definitely.
which again is a good artistic choice, you know, kind of who they're choosing to do the vocals. So,
Exactly.
any other songs want to call out?
No, I think
I think we talked about almost all of them. So,
Yeah, yeah.
which does happen a lot. So.
Thing I know for sure that I cannot create it and I cannot sustain it. It's your love that's keeping me. Please be my strength. Please be my strength. I don't have any more. I don't have any more.
You know, we're talking about this album 15 years later. If somebody has never gone and checked this album out, what would you tell them? What would you say? Hey, this is why you go back and check this album out.
I would say the art. Now that I've even learned more about the artistry of the actual the cover of the album, but also just the artistry within the actual instruments used, the different styles and genres of the music. I
Yeah.
think it catches its time, but in a good way,
Yep.
and definitely displays that, but with also a very authentic message for those who are Christians who kind of see the amazing beauty of God and our faith, but also the struggles and some of the hard times and the difficulties and the questions and that type of thing. It kind
Yeah.
of captures it all in an amazing way.
Yep. I think for me, this is one of those ones where they go after this, they get really experimental, in my opinion. Like they really start to play with a lot of things,
They do, yeah.
even more so than on this album. And so I think this is a cool to see. Like if you want to go check out somebody who is really, you know, I don't, again, what was it, brash music, you know, from that the record label. This
Right.
is clearly somebody who had a lot of freedom, but also had some support, which is an interesting dynamic because they were never a huge band. I mean, obviously the Grammy nominations, but it's not like, I mean, I think there's a chance that if people are like, what is this album all about? Like there's a chance that people are going to see this and have not heard of this. I think that's
Right.
entirely possible. And so I think there is something that's kind of cool about like, again, and I've not gone back and listened to those first two, but like this is when they really start to take off. And everything from this point on is the next one is a little less, it is still kind of in line with this. I'm going to try and remember the name of it here real quick. Ghost Upon the Earth.
Mm.
That's still, I think it ties in well with this, but then from that point on, I Am Mountain onward, it's experimental music. It is experimental indie music, and it's somebody who had financial backing, but also went out and did their own thing. So this is a really cool transition to that, and it's kind of cool to see a band find their feet a little, and then especially to kind of see where they go.
Definitely, yeah. And that was again just kind of my experience in seeing them live. So of course I saw them live after Beautiful Things came out. Didn't catch the album after that.
Sure.
And then saw them live, and I have the album for I Am Mountain, which was exactly what you said, very experimental. And
Yeah.
seeing them live with that album as opposed to Beautiful Things was very, very different. Really amazing still in both ways, but very different experiences.
Yeah, totally. And like, yeah, they just, again, Ghost Upon the Earth is also kind of, you can start to see it a little, but like, and that one, I mean, again, brash music, that one's comes out only a year later. This is February of 2010. And then by Ghost Upon the Earth is in September of 2011. So about a year and a half between. And by that one coming out, that one reached number 43, it looks like, on the US charts. So like that really, they did clearly catch something. Nothing ever, I Am Mountain hit 50, and then there's nothing, not a whole lot else that it's peaked super high. Right. But so it is an interesting career arc. And I know it's a really interesting, because I remember having a discussion with somebody about them they were playing Joel Osteen's church. They were like leading worship at Joel Osteen's church at some point in the 2010s, which is a really interesting mix compared, where Michael's gone.
Right.
But so clearly they did have some clout behind them, and they moved some units at some point, but it is an interesting career arc because they feel very, very independent. In 2013, they're winning Independent Music Awards. I mean, it is an interesting music arc, but it is one of those things that I think, especially this album, this is going to hit your mainstream mainline evangelicals probably the easiest of any of the albums. Even Ghost Upon the Earth is already starting to push a little, probably too experimental for some.
Right.
But there's enough songs on here that you could do some of these corporately. Not all of them, and you might have to strip down some of them a little, and maybe you don't have quite as much instrumentation. But I think you could bring some of these into a corporate setting and sing some of them. Not all of them, but I think you could do some of them.
Definitely.
They could be a special music on a Sunday morning for sure.
Try something different, right?
Yes, exactly.
It's covering the shame of all these weary hands and causing us to turn our face again. Your name praise and be lifted higher. 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 And be lifted.
Okay, that is our breakdown of Beautiful Things by Gungor. Again, feel pretty confident about this release date, February 16th of 2010. So it is celebrating a 15-year anniversary. Theo, I know you and I connected online. That's where we had never met in person. Well, this is still over Zoom, but we had never, met outside of the Twitterverse. So where can people find you online if they want to kind of follow you and get connected with you? And if you have stuff to sell, this is a chance to do that. If you don't have stuff to sell, that's fine. I don't have anything to sell either.
Nothing to sell. Sell. They can find me on Twitter or Blue Sky at Evangelic Monk, all one word.
Okay.
They want to reach out to me or kind of follow what random things I post.
Yep. Cool. And I'll definitely have a link to it in the show notes. I'll probably link to your Twitter one because that's the easiest. That's the one I still use, despite my varying degrees of success on Twitter and how I feel about it right now. But
gotcha.
Yeah, so awesome. Well, I'm so glad this worked. Thanks so much for joining me. This is a weird time of year. There's, this is not an album. Like, I think if you throw this in the middle of July, where I have too many albums to choose from because there's tons of albums that came out, I probably don't pick it. I probably am going to push it off, but I'm excited. It was really good to go back and listen to this. So I'm glad, I threw it out there and you were like, hey, I'll sign up to do this. I honestly didn't think I was going to find somebody. So when I saw your name show up on the spreadsheet, I was like, all right, I got somebody. This is great. I'm not going to have to go begging for somebody to I have thought about the idea. If I can't find somebody, I'll just do it myself, and it'll be 45 minutes of me jabbering on, and nobody wants to hear that. So I was really glad when you got to do it, and I'm glad we were able to connect and do it. So, and for me, it was great to re-listen to this. I had not given it a really deep listen in probably a while. And so to be able to do that, again, that's kind of the joy of the show, in my opinion, is getting to do that deep dive. So
yeah, definitely the same. I really enjoyed it. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, thanks, man. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. It was great seeing you. Great meeting you.
Yeah. In person for the first time, not in person.
Exactly.
But if we don't have love, we're left with nothing. People of God, rise up and shine. God's love, we are the light of the world, We are the light of the world.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Album Anniversary Podcast. Again, I want to say thanks to Theo for joining. Like I said at the end of the show, I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to find somebody for this, and so it was great to have somebody who signed up and who was interested. And I got to revisit this album. I hadn't really taken a deep dive on this album in quite a while, so it was great. Glad he could join me and we could chat about this album. It was great to have him. Let us know what you thought. What did we get right? What did we get wrong? What are your favorites from this album? You can find me on Twitter at KilledTheSpy, no spaces. I'm also on Instagram at KilledTheSpy with underscores. And I'm also on Blue Sky. I've been starting to post there a little. It's KilledTheSpy. I think you'll be able to find me. I think if you look for KilledTheSpy on Blue Sky, you can find me. You can email the show, killedthespypodcast@gmail.com. I am always open to emails. If you're interested in being on the show, that's probably the easiest way to do it at this point is email me, follow me on one of the social medias. I also am going to try and start a Patreon. I've been working on it. I don't know when it'll be out, if I'll have it set up by the time this episode is out in a couple weeks, but that is my goal, is to also start a Patreon just so that it's an easy way to connect, an easy way to follow the show, even if you end up not being on Twitter. So there's other ways to kind of stay connected with the show. Please subscribe and share the podcast. That's obviously another way to stay connected with the show. If you leave a reading or review, I have heard that is an effective way to spread the word about podcasts, that the algorithm does pick up those ratings and reviews. So please drop me a rating, leave a quick review if you can. I would really appreciate it. If you enjoy this show, you might also enjoy the other podcast I do with my friend Scott. It's called I Survived Youth Group in the 90s. It's not just a podcast where we reminisce about our youth and our youth group experience. We're trying to interview fellow 90s youth group kids and some 2000s youth group kids, and just we want to hear their story, whether you've left the faith entirely or you are still at the church you were raised at. We want to hear kind of where you're at today and your story about how you got there, and kind of hear about that youth group experience and how it's impacted your life. The music at the beginning and the end of the show is the instrumental version of the song Sing It Out at Street Level by Peg and the Rejected. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you soon. Edit out that because that was bad.
No problem.
I try and make myself sound good. It doesn't work sometimes. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Album Anniversary Podcast. I want to say thanks again to Theo for listening, or for George Sheepers. 3, 2, 1.